All right, so we are going to go ahead and get started. And again, I am Dr. Kimberly Mays here at Florida Gulf Coast University. Thank you for joining us. This is the Advanced Practice Guest Lecture Series. And the purpose of this series is to really help the students that are graduating this semester and give them an insight basically around the varying areas of social work practice. Oftentimes, social work is very linear according to what a lot of individuals think, but it is very broad. And so I wanted to bring us a group of individuals who were doing varying things in social work practice that were not in the traditional roles, so to speak. And so today we have Dr. Victor Manalo. He is going to be joining us talking about political social work and giving us some insight in terms of his current role, as well as how he got into this area of social work practice and some other tidbits. And so, Dr. Manilo, it is on you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. I appreciate it. I'm very just honored that you asked me, invited me to be here with your graduating students. And I just want to give props to all the students that are graduating. Very, very exciting. And I know I'm very honored to be just like a little tiny piece of your journey here. And hopefully you will leave this session this morning feeling like you have a few more things that you can add to your tool belt and things that you could add to your vision as you look at um, embarking on your career as a social worker. And so my name is Victor Manalo. It's not Manalo. I wish I was
I'm so
related to Barry
sorry.
Manilow,
I'm
but
so sorry.
I'm not. But that's okay. A lot of people get it wrong. It's either Manalo or Manolo, but it's Manalo. It's actually a Filipino last name. That's my father's surname. My dad was born in the Philippines, and it's actually a it's an indigenous word in from the indigenous language of the Philippines, and one of the thousands of indigenous languages. But Tagalog, which many people know, that's the national language. But Manalo is actually a word in Tagalog. And my mom, her last name is Martinez, so she had kind of like the Spanish influence, right? Because Spain, conquered the Philippines, and obviously my mom's maiden name Martinez. The Spanish were doing a lot more than just, hanging out in the islands. So that's my background, and tell you a little bit more about myself as we go forward. And I'm really excited to be here because there are, questions that Dr. Kim suggested that I cover, and I think are obviously very appropriate for those of you who are ready to graduate. So I'm really excited to share some of my story with you and to answer any questions that you might have. And I'll give you my contact information as well at the end. And I know that so we'll have some time towards the end too of my presentation to ask questions. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And someone will. I know somebody is going to be keeping track of that, but if I happen to see it come up on my chat, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have um, for me. So just in terms of giving you a kind of a context and introduction for myself, I am a social worker, of course, and I'm a member of the National Association of Social Workers. And I'm sure most of you have heard of NASW, and hopefully some of you are members of NASW, because it's when you're a student, the rate is significantly much lower than it is once you become a professional. But even when you do have to pay the yearly rate, which is I think it's over 200 now, $200 now. I have to renew actually. Um, it's still worth it because it comes out to like 20 bucks a month. So I think it's worth it, but I'll talk to you a little bit more about NASW later, but in my how I'm involved in NASW, but it's the largest professional association for social workers in the United States. And I'm here in California, in Southern California, outside of Los Angeles. And our chapter, the California chapter, is the largest chapter in the United States, NASW. There are about 55 chapters, and nationwide, there are over 100,000 social workers that are members of NASW. And here in California, we've got about 8,000 members. So it's a pretty large association and something I definitely encourage all of you to check out and to become members, and I'll tell you more why. So, but that's one of my affiliations. Um, oh, sorry, how did I go backwards there? I don't know how that happened. There we go. Okay, and then my next affiliation, California State University, Los Angeles. That's where I'm at today. Unfortunately, I'm in a temporary office space because we're having some construction and renovations done in our offices. But I've been teaching here in the School of Social Work at Cal State Los Angeles. Ooh, since 1999. And every time I say that, I feel much older. So, and I'm sure there may be some of you here that weren't even born at that time, and that's okay too, because I'm used to it. But yeah, I've been here teaching here for a long time, and I still continue to teach here, and that's why I decided to go get my PhD, which I'll talk about later, because I wanted to teach and to be around students and to be on a campus where everyone like wants to learn because I want to keep learning um, in my life. There's so much to learn, and so that's that. And then the Artesia, California, that's the city that I live in. But I'm not sharing that with you because I want to show you where I live. But I was an elected city council member there in the city of Artesia for 12 years. And before then, I served on the Planning Commission. I continue to serve on the Planning Commission today, even though I'm not elected. I'm an appointed official to my city. And those 12 years and all that time since, I'm still involved in local government, as I mentioned, on the Planning Commission. And I'm a firm believer in social workers being involved in local government. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later and why I think that's important. But it comes out of my own experience. And the last is the seal of the County of Los Angeles, which is the county that I live in. And it is, I think it's the largest county in the United States in terms of population. We have about 10 million people that live in the county of Los Angeles, and that includes the city of Los Angeles. It includes other large cities that you may have heard of, City of Long Beach, City of Santa Monica, City of Pasadena. Those are all major cities in Los Angeles County, along with the city of Los Angeles, of course, which is a major city. 10 million people. And I put that there because I am an appointed official for the County of Los Angeles. I am a commissioner on the Los Angeles County Behavioral Health Commission. That commission is responsible for advising our County Board of Supervisors on everything and anything that has to do with behavioral and mental health. So if you think about it, and every time I think about it, I think, how did I get on this commission where I actually have a chance to have some influence and input and a voice with the Board of Supervisors on anything that has to do with behavioral and mental health in a county of 10 million people? Seems kind of amazing to me, but guess what? All of you could do the same thing, right? You can all do the same thing. And that's really my message to all of you, is that you can do it. Now, I don't want to set you up here. You can't do it tomorrow. You might not be able to do it next week or next month either. It took me, I guess, since I got my MSW, it took me over 30 years to get here, okay, to this point. But I want to share with you my experience and how I got here. Because maybe if you start today, it won't take you 20 years to get here like I did. Maybe it'll only take you 10 years, and you'll have more time in your career to have influence at some of these macro level uh, entities and institutions that we interact with, whether it's your county, whether it's your city, whether it's your agency or organization where you work. All of the things I'm going to talk about today are all applicable to any of those macro level um, entities and institutions and systems that you might find yourself involved in, that you want to change, because that's what we're about, social workers, right? Not just change with individuals and groups and families, but change across the board, across micro and macro levels. So we're talking about changes in your community, your neighborhoods, your government, changes in your agency and how services are delivered, how funding is allocated, how funding is invested from federal government and state governments and counties into your communities. You can all have a part to play in that if you decide you want to. And I'm hoping that I can convince you to take a step in that direction today. So, about my career journey, I got a bachelor's degree in social work from Marquette University. That's in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, because I grew up in Chicago. And then I moved out here to Los Angeles in 1987. And a few years later, after working a few different jobs in social work, I decided to go back to school to get my MSW. And when I got into the MSW program, I wanted to be a clinician. I wanted to get my license, and I wanted to do mm, one-on-one counseling and therapy, specifically with children that are abused and neglected. Then um, I had a key turning point in my life, which I'll talk about in a moment. But in terms of education, to finish that off, I did get my PhD later on after I got my MSW, and I got my PhD from the University of Southern California, which is the West Coast USC. I know you have a USC out there, but we're the West Coast USC. And then after that, I started teaching here at Cal State Los Angeles. So my education, specifically with my MSW and PhD, got me into teaching, which is really the main thing I wanted to do. But the key turning point, really, in all of that, because I never thought I was going to be a professor and to get my PhD. But the key turning point for me was when I was in my MSW program. When, as I mentioned to you earlier, I got into my MSW program because I wanted to be a clinician. I wanted to get my license and I wanted to be a therapist. That was my goal. So in my first internship, I did an internship at a place in South Los Angeles called the Kaiser Watts Counseling and Learning Center, and I was doing a clinical internship. And my my field instructor, after the first semester, my field instructor thought I was great. I was doing really well. I knew I was doing well, from the feedback and work I had been doing with my field instructor, and I was like, wow, I am on my way. I am going to graduate in a couple years. This is my first internship. I wanted to be a therapist, and here I am learning how to do therapy. I am on my way, and I'm ready to go. And, things were looking up for me, totally looking up for me. I was really excited. Then at the end of that first semester, I got married. So like things were even looking up even more. I'm like, oh my God, I'm married, So I started the spring semester of that internship. I'm like, oh my God, I'm married. I can't be happier in my life. I can't be happier in my career. I married a woman that was also a social worker, and we were actually getting our MSWs at the same time. So it just seemed like, wow, everything was like clicking, everything was going like perfectly in the right direction. I couldn't have been happier in my life. So I came back to in the spring semester after getting married and starting my semester again, and everything was going great. Started back up in January, went through February, March, April, everything was going great. So April comes along, past midterms, I'm like downhill to graduation, just like you are right now, right? I was like, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. Then something happened at the end of April in the spring of 1992 that was a key turning point in my in my career. And I see Dr. Kim shaking her head. Do you know what happened in the spring of 1992 in Los Angeles?
I was born and raised in Los Angeles, so
You
yes.
were?
Yes.
No way.
Yes, please share. This was a big thing.
Yes. So in the spring of 1992, there was a court case that had gone to trial, and it was a gentleman named Rodney King, and he was a black man. Now, back in 92, mind you, we didn't have internet, right? We didn't have any of this stuff. But in 1992, well, it was about a year before, 1991, Rodney King got pulled over by the Los Angeles Police Department. They, a whole bunch of police cars had surrounded him. All these cops got out of their cars because they had been chasing him, right? So they had been chasing him around. He finally pulled over, got out of his car. They yanked him out of his car and just started beating the you know what out of him. This was 1992, 1991. Okay, so no one had phones to be able to stand there and record what was happening like we all do today. But what happened back then, which never would have thought would happen, because back then we had video cameras, right? But they weren't like this. Video cameras like this big, right? You had to put them on your shoulder. You had to look through the viewfinder. And it had a big VHS tape in it. I don't know if you all remember VHS tapes, but they're like this big, right? So the machine that you had to put the tape in was even bigger. It had the big lens on it, and someone saw this happening, got out their video camera, and started taping it. They sent it to the news, and it went viral back then, right? Which we know what viral is today, right? Except it was a lot harder to go viral back then. Once it got on the news, and all the news stations were showing it, and everyone was just appalled, right, at the behavior of the Los Angeles Police Department. So fast forward a year, and a number of the cops that had gotten pulled over, LAPD, got pulled over. They were put on trial. Um, they were put on trial for, violating the civil rights of Rodney King and, beating the what out of him and all that. And in April, I think it was April 29th, if I recall correctly, that day I was in my internship. And I remember one of my clients coming in, and she said, "Do you know what happened?" She said, "They let all the cops off. They got scot-free. Nothing. They weren't convicted of anything, not one thing." And of course, I was a little concerned. And after our session, I went out to the front desk area, and our executive director, Dr. Bill Coggins, he was pacing up and down like he was worried. I could tell he was worried. So he told everyone to go home. So I did. I went home. I drove around the neighborhood because I was like, my executive director is worried. I wonder what he's worried about. And I thought, maybe people would, there'd be some unrest or something, and people would be, get angry, and maybe they'd come out of their houses or their apartments, and I drove around for a bit. I didn't see anything, so I went home. But when I got home, my phone was ringing off the hook. I know you don't know what that means, but that means because we used in our houses, our phones actually had to, yeah, the riots. I got home because we used to have phones in our houses, right, that hung on the wall. So when I got home, the phone was ringing. I picked up the phone and my friend is on the phone. She says, "Do you see what's happening on TV?" I said, "No." She goes, "Turn on your TV." I turned on the TV. There were full-blown riots were starting all over Los Angeles. And I had just left that area not too long before. Um, you can look it up. You can Google it. Look it on YouTube. Look up the Los Angeles riots, 1992, and you'll see what happened. People went out in the streets. People were angry. People were angry at the verdicts, angry at another instance of being victimized by the LAPD and their communities. Um, they were burning buildings, they were looting, they were, uh, accosting people in their cars. It was utter mayhem. And what I realized from that as it was going on, I said, you know what? I looked and saw what was happening in my community. I said, I understand. I understand everything that's going on right now. It made sense to me, right? All these people that I was working with in my therapeutic internship, all these people that had anger, frustration, um, disempowered people living in communities that were disinvested, that lacked from investment. There were no banks, there were no grocery stores. There were, Dr. Kim, right? I mean, you grew up in that area. There was nothing for people. And on top of that, since the 60s, the community had been complaining about the way that they were treated by Los Angeles Police Department. So this was just the straw that broke the community's back. And they said, we can't take this anymore. And they just erupted. And when I realized that I understood, that I could understand as a social worker, right? Because that's what we do. We understand things. We understand where people come from. We understand their context. We understand their history. We understand their experience and what brings them to what leads them to certain decisions, right? To me, it made sense why these people were out there. But deep inside, I had another thought. I said, what am I doing inside this? What am I doing at this internship? It made me question what my career path was. And at that point, after about a week of rioting, when things calmed down and I got back to my internship, I had decided within a week, I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to be a therapist. I can't be a therapist. It's not what I want to do. It's not what I feel like I'm being called to do as a social worker. I said, I don't know what I want to do as a social worker, but I know it's not therapy. And I know I don't want to get my license. But what really was pulling me was everything that was happening out there in the community. I said, I can't be here. If I'm going to be a social worker, I got to be out there. I have to be out there in the community. I got to be out there with the people that are living 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with this in their lives and understanding what's happening in those communities so that I can maybe be, so that I can help, right? And to help those communities. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no direction. All I knew was I couldn't do therapy anymore. So shortly thereafter, I went back to my school of social work because this was my first year of internship, right? So I had another internship coming up in the next year. So I went back to my internship to the director of field, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do micro. Give me a macro placement next semester, next year. I'm not doing therapy anymore. I want a macro placement. So that's what I did. Got a macro placement, and I got an administrative placement where I actually got to work with an administrator in our county Department of Child Protection, which we call the Department of Children and Family Services in our county. So I was an administrator, and I was an intern with a social worker who was an administrator in that department. Now, the cool thing was, I was actually working for the Department of Children and Family Services at the time. So I was a social worker that was working with the kids and families in my job, in my regular 24, 40-hour a week job. But now I was doing an internship in an administrative part of the same agency I was working in. So I have to tell you, it blew my mind to think that, oh my God, I'm doing this work directly with children and families, and there are all these people that are working in these administrative offices that are working in the same agency that I am, and they're doing something totally different. And like they're the ones that are managing this whole operation that I'm a part of. And I said to myself, oh my God, there's a whole world out there of what social workers are doing. And I had no clue. I had no clue any of this stuff was going on because I was so focused on becoming a therapist. So that was a key turning point in my career. And uh, if I didn't, if I hadn't had, if that did not happen to me, I definitely would not be where I am today, 30 years later, 32 years later now, right? I would not be here right now. And when that turning point happened, as I said, I had no clue what I was gonna do, what kind of job I was gonna get, or where I would end up as a social worker. If you would have asked me back then that you would if you would have told me that if I had went back to myself 30 years ago and said, "Oh, you're going to have a PhD, you're going to teach at a university, you're going to have been an elected official, you're going to be a commissioner on this LA County Commission, and you're going to be active in NASW and have an opportunity to exercise your leadership with your professional association." I would have said, "Are you kidding me? No way." I mean, that was so far. I mean, I had no idea that even existed for social workers. Okay. So that's and that any path you take is going to have its challenges, right? Even though I knew that turning point pointed me in the right direction and led me on a journey to where I am today, it's not without its challenges. Right? And there are always going to be challenges, even though I'm I have the I have the great fortune to be able to look back at my 30 years of being a social worker and seeing the progression of my career over time and seeing that it was all meant to be and it was all supposed to happen that way. Same thing's going to happen for you. Believe it or not, it's going to happen for you. If you, God willing, right, are able to have a career of over 30 years like mine, you'll be able to look back and say, wow, look at how far I've come, right? And you may be doing something 30 years from now that you had no idea you would be doing, right? That's the beauty of our profession. It is flexible. I have met social workers doing all kinds of work in all kinds of places, in all kinds of agencies and organizations. You you would be amazed. You would be amazed. Um, so challenges faced. Well, I'll tell you one of the first challenges I had to face because when another key turning point and challenge together in my career was, I started teaching and I was getting into a PhD program, starting my PhD program. And because of my interest in macro social work. I taught all the macro classes, right? I mostly policy classes. I taught community organizing. I taught some research later on, all kinds of stuff. But mostly policy, macro policy classes. And I learned right away on the first day of class, and I would talk to students about policy. I mean, I could always see them rolling their eyes or like, go, oh, policy. Oh my God, what does that have to do with anything? I want to be a therapist. Why am I in a policy class? So I took that as a challenge, right? I said, okay, well, you have to be here. So I guess I need to make it palatable. I need to make it relevant. I need to show you that, yes, a policy class has some relevance for your career as a social worker. And I'm hoping all of you see that relevance. But I'm even going to take it a little bit further because the more that I taught my classes, one thing, my policy classes specifically, the one thing that I concluded with, that I came to a conclusion about, was that social workers need to be more active and involved in politics, right? This was a latter revelation for me. But back then, I said you need to be more involved in policy. Well, in my mind, what did that look like? Well, it came down to you have to run to be an elected official. You have to run for office. You have to be an elected official. That was my conclusion when I first started teaching policy. Well, one day I was looking in the mirror. That was seriously was looking in the mirror. Um, after I got home from, ending a semester of a class and telling my students you have to run for elected office. And one day I looked in the mirror and the mirror said to me, Victor, it's all good. You're telling your students this, but what are you doing? You're not an elected official. You haven't run for office. How can you tell your students that they should be running for office and you haven't done anything? So I had to call myself to the table. I had to make myself accountable. So that was another key turning point in my career. And I said, okay, well, I got to run for office. The challenge was, what do I run for? So I set my sights through a number of different things that happened in my life that led me to run for city council in my city, the city of Artesia that I showed you earlier in my introduction. That's the city where I live right now. So I said, I'm going to run for city council. Of course, I had no idea what I was doing, right? I had no clue. I didn't know what it meant to run an election. Um, you know, I knew nothing, right, about running election. So, but I threw my hat in. I said, I'm going to run for city council. So I said, I'm a doctoral student. I'm going to get a PhD. I've got education. I'm a social worker. I'm a good person, right? People are going to vote for me. So, but of course, I didn't know what I was doing. So the first time I ran, I lost, of course. I lost very badly. Very badly. Um, I was like, even though there were three seats, right? So there were three seats on the council that were up for reelection. I came in fourth place, but I was fourth place like by a long shot, right? So the three people that won were the uh, that won. I was like way behind in fourth place, way behind, like discouragingly behind. Um, so I said, well, I can't give this up. So there was going to be another election in 2 years, and I said, okay, I'm gonna start now, thinking about preparing myself to run for the next election, which was 2 years from then. And as I sat down and I looked at my campaign and what I did, what I didn't do, I realized again that I didn't know what I was doing, and I need to learn how to win a campaign. Otherwise, I would not be successful the next time. And one of the main things that I learned from this challenge of losing this first election was that I had to overcome and do what our moms told us we should never do. One is brag about yourself, and two is ask for money. Because you can't be an elected official if you can't do both of those things. You can't get elected if you can't brag about yourself, because then how are people going to know you and what you've done and what you bring and get them to vote for you? And number two, you need to ask for money because you need money. Now, I'm not talking about tons of money for a small city like mine, but you need some money, right? Even if you want to have a website and you want to email stuff out, you think it doesn't cost that much money. But if you want something that looks good and looks professional, like a website or a PDF flyer or a picture that you're going to put out, it has to look good. And if you want it to look good, sometimes you got to pay money to do that. People, to do that for you. You can't do it yourself. You can't use a selfie for your picture when you're going to run for a city council election, right? You have to have a professionally done um, photo, right? Because people see your selfie, they're like, "Oh, this person isn't serious. They're just taking a picture off their phone and cropping it, right?" And you could see your friend's hand behind you, right? Because they're giving you a hug. You see their person's hand, on the side of your shoulder, and people are like, "This person isn't serious," right? So, anyways, those two things: brag about yourself, ask for money. Those are the two things that I learned after I first lost my election. So, go to the second election. I had raised money and I had begun to brag and tell people who I am and what I do. And I had started to make connections in the community and meet people in between, even before the election, so that people could get to know me, right? Well, in the second election, guess what happened? You're saying he won. No, I lost. You know what? I lost by 21 votes. 21 votes I lost by. But you know what? My son had just been born, my youngest. He'd just been born a couple months before. I said, you know what? This is a good thing. I don't need to be an elected official while my youngest was just born. I need to be home. I need to be able to support my wife. And I had two other kids that were older. I said, I still need to be home. So I said, okay. I said, but I'm going to stick with this. I'm not going to give up this dream. So 4 years later, I decided I'm going to go again because the other thing I had learned in my last two elections is that I had run against incumbents. Incumbents are the people that already are in that position and they're running for re-election. It's hard to run against incumbents. Okay? It's hard to knock somebody out of office, right? If you're a new person. Because it's easier to vote with what you know than it is for someone that you don't know very well. Okay? Especially if everything's okay and there's nothing that people are upset or angry about, right? So I said, you know what, I'm not gonna run again until there's there's what we call an open seat, right? Where there's not an incumbent running, where it's just open to anybody that wants to run. So I said, okay, I'm gonna wait for that open seat. Well, 4 years later, that open seat came up, and I ran for it, and I won. And I spent 12 years on that city council. So I had three more elections, and I got reelected every time for 12 years. And I'm very grateful to have done that. But so the challenge was to do something because I'll tell you this and I'll move on. I see so many people running for office. You see them, they lose, and then they disappear off the face of the earth. And I think to myself, why did you want to run in the first place? Did you really want to help your community? Did you really think you had something to offer? Or did you think that being an elected official was something else, right? Um, so don't give up. If you're feeling that in your heart and in your soul, if you feel like you're being drawn to do something, don't be don't be discouraged by challenges and by losing sometimes or making mistakes because those are your greatest opportunities for learning. Okay? So, I see myself as a political social worker, right? And I've met tons of social workers along the way who also, one of my good friends, Marla, uh, Marla, that I met, is, she actually got her start in politics working for President Biden when he was a senator way back in the day, because he was a senator long before he became vice president and then president. And she's the first one that said to me, I'm a political social worker. I said, okay, I'm stealing that from you because that's what I'm gonna call myself too, because I see myself as a political social worker, meaning that a lot of the stuff that I do is in the political world, right? So let me tell you, about, what I do in my life. So my mission is related to that. It's related to politics. But my mission is really to empower social workers, right? Social workers and social work students, empower them to use their leadership in their communities, their neighborhoods, their agencies. Wherever you find yourself, you should be using your leadership skills. That's my message to social workers. Because, and I'm not trying to discourage or dissuade any of you from becoming clinicians. This is not my point, okay? But if you're going to be a clinician and you're going to do all this wonderful stuff that we do as social workers with just the people that you're paid to work with, then the world is missing out on you and the gifts and the skills and the strengths that you have because your communities, your neighborhoods need you. Your government, your local government, your state government, your county government, and yes, even your federal government can use you and use your help. But if we're only doing the work that we do as social workers in that 40-hour a week or however many hours you're working, that time you get paid, and that's it, you are depriving the world of your gifts and your education, your abilities to solve problems, to work with people, to work with others, to come up with solutions, and to improve things across the board. Okay? So open yourself off. I walked in today in my office, and there's one of the staff members here. I haven't seen her in a long time. She goes, I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm like, yeah. And I tell her all the stuff I'm doing. And she goes, wow, you're busy. I say, yeah, I'm busy. But you know what? I'm busy doing things that I want to do. And that's what defines my life now, 30 years later, from getting my MSW. Now I'm going to spend the rest of my career, knock on wood, for as long as I have left, to do the things that I want to do. So, for example, today, this is the first thing you know, on my list of things to do, was I have this guest lecture. Well, from here, I'm going over to our student union, where I'm going to be facilitating a panel discussion for students in the university. I'm going to be hosting or moderating this panel on how students can get more involved in government and specifically in local government, right? Because that's my thing, that's my mission, right? So I'm doing that. Um, and then, I teach. So I teach classes. I teach 4 classes a semester, and I'm usually here on campus on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I'm here on a day which is my off day, but I've still got stuff to do, right? So I'm teaching, and I'm teaching 2 graduate courses, one on community organizing and one on advanced policy. And I'm teaching 2 undergraduate courses, one on policy for social work students who are working with older adults and the elderly. And I'm teaching another community organizing class for undergraduate students. So again, still part of my mission, right? And and then one of the other major things that I do, and then I told you that I'm on the planning commission in my city. We meet once a month on Thursday nights. And then the Behavioral Commission, LA County, that I'm on, the LA County Behavioral Commission, Behavioral Health Commission, we meet twice. We meet twice a month on Thursdays, right? So my week is jam-packed with different things, but it changes from week to week. You know, what I do. But I'm really excited and happy to be doing the things that I'm doing. And what I found out, what I've really come to learn that I want to share with you, uh, with all of you is that the skills that you have as a social worker are so there. These skills are not only necessary for what you do as a social worker, but when you're out there, and I'm telling you from again from my own experience, because I've been out and about in my community all throughout Los Angeles County. I've met hundreds of elected officials and other people that represent their communities, staff members that work in various cities throughout Los Angeles County. Met tons and tons of people, right? And there's one thing that I know is that all of us as social workers are potentially, if we were to get engaged, if all of us were, all social workers were to somehow get more engaged in their own local communities, neighborhoods, and their cities, we could make a huge difference, not only in our communities and our neighborhoods and our cities, but we could have as a rippling effect, we'd have a huge influence in our country, I believe. Okay. But again, you got to think, you got to think in the future, right? I'm not thinking about next week, next month, or next year. I'm talking about 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. Because the world that I see 30 years from now is a world that your kids, my grandkids, my great grandkids, relatives, I'm looking 30 years from now. What do I want this world to be, and what do I want social workers to be doing in this world 30 years from now? That's what I'm thinking. If we start now, if all of us start now, 30 years from now, imagine how many more social workers will be involved in their communities and neighborhoods, making a difference in their communities and neighborhoods, and then maybe even at higher levels in their counties, in their states, and yes, even in their federal government. Because what's happening right now in Washington, D.C. didn't just start last week. It didn't just happen in November of last year. It took years for someone like the current president to get where he's at, where he could become president. Okay? Didn't seem like it, but it took years. So we have to think the same way. We got to think about what we want this world to be like 30 years from now. Our skills are so useful. And I'm going to go a little quickly because I know I'm spending a lot of time and I want to give you all some time to ask questions. But the one thing that I found, and this is what I'm really the core of my message, is what is leadership? Because you need to have leadership to be able to to make change at some of these at the macro level, right? Changes in organizations, changes in communities and neighborhoods, changes in government. You need leadership, and you all are leaders, whether you recognize it or not. You're leaders because this is the definition I'm using now of leadership that I just found. Leadership is the process of influencing others to understand and agree about what needs to be done and how to do it. Isn't that what we all want to do? We all have great ideas. As social workers, we have great ideas. We know what needs to be done, how to do it, but how do you convince others to agree with you? That's the key to change. Because I hate to tell you this, everyone has great ideas. Not just you, not just because you have an MSW, and not just Dr. Kim and I because we have PhDs. Everyone's got great ideas. Great ideas is not the key. The key is how do you get people to agree about what needs to be done? That's that's the challenging piece. That's what we need leaders for, right? And look at the second half of this definition, the process of facilitating individual and collective efforts to accomplish those shared objectives. So you have to influence people to understand and agree what needs to be done, but then you have to say, okay, we all agree on these goals and objectives of what we need to do. Okay, let's do it. And you have to manage and facilitate that process for people to get things done. That is leadership. That's the leadership that we need in our communities, in our neighborhoods. in your agencies, in your governments, whatever you see it, what it doesn't matter what it could be in your PTA, it could be in your in your church group, it could be um, in the service club, a Rotary club, or whatever club you decide to join, right? Could be an NASW. All of these institutions, associations, organizations, they all need our leadership, right? But you have to understand that you have to know how to use your leadership effectively. That's what this definition is about. And the key to that is relationships. The key to using your leadership is relationships. This is from the Code of Ethics. You've all seen this, I'm sure, and have read over it, but I want to highlight this for all of you. Social workers understand that relationships between and among people are an important vehicle for change. You know that at the individual level. You know that when working with clients. That's why you work so hard to develop a good relationship with your clients. But guess what? Relationships between other people, anyone that you meet, is also an important vehicle for change. Whether it's Dr. Kim, whether it's your supervisor at work, or your field instructor, or your next door neighbor, or the city council person that represents you, or the CEO or executive director of a nonprofit in your community, doesn't matter. All those relationships count and are potentially an important vehicle for change. So you need to get out there. I know people probably told you this all the time since you've been a student. You got to get out there and you got to network. You got to meet people, right? And use the relationships that you know how to use and develop to be able to meet people. So this is my biggest piece of advice, right, to all of you as you think about embarking on your career as social workers. My biggest piece of advice is meet as many people as you can and get to know the kind of people, connect with, network with, develop relationships with the kind of people that are doing the kind of work that you want to do, whether it's next week, or the kind of work you want to do next month, or the kind of work that you aspire to do in your social work career. Go out and meet those people and tell them, be a fan, you know, be a giddy fan like I was all the time. When I would meet some professor, some doctor that wrote this article that I had read, and I was like, oh my God, when I was a student, I was like, oh my God, how can I be, how can I be as articulate as you? I remember meeting one guy once, one doctor. I said, how do I talk like you? How can I lecture like you? How can I be inspiring like you? I was just sitting there, oh, here I am, this little kid. I don't know what I'm doing. But you know what? Those are the people that I've met in my life that are willing to recognize you and say, you know what? There's something in this person. They have a spark. They have a determination. They have initiative. They want to make something of themselves, right? Everyone will see that and they'll say, you know what, I'm going to take you under my wing. I'm going to invite you to meetings. I'm going to talk to you every once in a while. I'll be here if you have questions. Those are the people that are going to guide your career, right? You can't do it by yourself. You need people's help. Just like people come to seek us for help for social workers, we also need to know how important it is to seek help from other people, right? Especially people in the field of social work or in other fields that we look up to and that we aspire to, that we want to be like, that we want to get to know and kind of soak up and learn from their wisdom. Okay. So that would be my biggest advice for you. So now that I've taken up a lot of time talking, I would love to open it up, Dr. Kim, if I can, if anyone has any questions or comments or anything. Happy to do that right now.
Thank you so much. Yes, if anyone has any questions, you can put it directly in the chat or you can come off of mute. No problem.
Hi, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your passion and for also talking about what it's like to be a leader in the field of social work outside of private practice and what we would think normally. I've thought a lot about macro and kind of what I want to do in the future. I do think that it's very important to consider politics, and even when we took the class, I think it was last semester, I actually found it very helpful because I like to think of myself as a person that stays up with the world events, but I think looking at it from a lens of how can social workers help people in our communities, as well as influence politics and those who are actually creating legislation, is very important. So I think that's really powerful of what you shared in your story of how it started and where you are now, and kind of also encouraging us to keep going and that we will get there. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Jazz. I appreciate it. I, you hit it right. You hit the nail right on the head, Jazz. I think you definitely have, you're already thinking like a macro, and I'm not totally macro, right? Because we're all micro and macro, right? If you're a social worker, you're micro and macro. Whether you went through a clinical program, like Jacob said in the chat, right? It doesn't matter. We still have to think micro and macro. We just have, it's just you just have to shift your mind a little bit when you go from macro to micro or micro to macro. But at some point, right, all of those skills need to come into play, right? So even though I'm mostly on the macro level, I'm working with people all the time. And if you're working with people, you have to know the things that we know at the micro level, like what makes people tick, what in their history, what motivates them, what inspires them, what buttons do I need to push to help them, to empower them so that they can make a change in their lives, right? All of these things are still applicable when you're working with other people, right? And applying your leadership. So that's great, Jazz. I appreciate that. And it is very important that because I'll tell you one more thing before I take another question is that um, we assume that people that we elect or people in government know what's best. We assume that. But I'll tell you, I've met tons of them. They don't. They think they know, and we think they know, but they don't. You know why? Because none of them are social workers. Very few of them are. What we bring is a very specific, unique, and very important point of view. Not everybody has that same point of view. So we have to get our voices in there. We have to offer our help because we are important to the people that live in our neighborhoods and communities, whether they know it or not, right? Our point of view is important, and we need to share that with the electeds because they don't know. They're not social workers, and they don't surround themselves with social workers. So we need to get up there and saying, hey, you know what? If you're thinking about solving the homelessness or unhoused problem in our communities, I'd love to help. And this is what I think we should be doing, right? Because no one's giving them that advice. I can almost guarantee it, right? Yeah,
That's really
politicians are
good.
human
Thank
too.
you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kim.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of point out some things that some of the things that you mentioned is that especially when you talked about you running early on in your career, the persistence that you had. Um, and also, one of the things that, you talked about in terms of like bringing up the riots and realizing that there was more that you wanted to do. And it kind of made me something that I always said the vision would be that we all work in a system and sometimes we have to work within the system to make to move the needle for change, right? So it sounds like you took that and you did that in the way that you felt would be fulfilling for you. And the other thing that I took note was that passionate students, I know that for a fact that there are passionate students within this cohort who will be amazing leaders, right? And just sharing your story really kind of humanized politics a little bit. And I thank you for sharing that, because when it comes to this work, sometimes there can be a bit of an invisible barrier to what it looks like to get started in this work, but then also the process, right? Usually it's, oh, the highs, all of the highs, but we don't talk about the journey. And so I appreciate that so much. But again, I really feel like a lot of what you brought today speaks to our students, and I know their capability, although sometimes we question ourselves. I feel like, we have amazing
I'll
leaders
do.
in this cohort who can really utilize what you shared, and take it for their journey of social work. So I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think it's really important what you said, Dr. Kim, is that all these politicians, elected officials, all these people, because I know what it's like for my students. When I tell them one of my assignments is you have to meet with an elected official, and you could see the fear in their eyes. It's like, why would I can't meet with an elected official. Why would they want to meet with me? They don't want to talk to me. What do I have to offer people, right? And it's straight out fear in their eyes, but it's all based on our preconceived notion of who an elected official is. And I'm telling you, I've met hundreds and hundreds of them on all levels. I've met President Clinton, and I've met people in the smallest city council here in California, everyone in between. And I'm telling you, there's one thing I know about each and every one of them. They're human. That's the one thing that they all share in common. They're all human beings. And I don't treat President Clinton any different than the person that I meet on any other city council, or the person who picks up the trash here in my office. They're all human beings, right? So we need to reevaluate our preconceived notions about these elected officials. And let me dispel some myths for you real quick while I have you on the line, if you don't mind, Dr. Kim. One, okay, I dispelled one. They're human beings, right? So treat them like and give them the respect that you would give anybody else that you meet as a social worker, right? Respect. You give people respect, then people will respect you, whether they're president of the United States or whether they're the person that at Starbucks, or the person that collects a parking ticket when you go into your office, right? Everyone deserves respect and needs respect and wants respect. And if you give them respect, it goes a long way. The second is that, I have this notion. A lot of people think this about me when I was on the city council, that we're making huge amounts of money from your taxpayer dollars. And one thing I can tell you, especially if you're talking about city council folks, right, at the local level, like the people that represent you in your cities, if you live in a small city, not a big city, and the big cities are different, like Chicago, LA, New York, all the big cities, yes, they get paid a lot of money because those are full-time jobs. Those are 24-hour days, days a week jobs, right? But if you're in a small city like mine, you know how much I got paid? $500 a month. So I had to keep my day job. I had to continue teaching here at Cal State LA, but everyone thought that I was a council member. That was my full-time job. It's not. For most of us, it's not our full-time job, right? So don't treat us like you're entitled to disrespect me and ask me for things because you think I'm making $1 million a year. I'm not, right? I'm just like everybody else. I've got a family. I had kids, trying to raise them, put them through college, right? Trying to pay my mortgage every month, my rent, like everybody else, right? So,
That's good. Again, humanizing a side of the work that our community leaders do, and it kind of goes into what I shared today. But we've talked about this several times. Sometimes the feeling, the passion that you have in doing what works within the communities comes with you having multiple roles, right? And so I like that about our degree is that I've
absolutely.
never met one social worker who has just one job.
Absolutely.
I don't know one social worker who literally has one role.
Right.
They typically have multiple roles because of not only sometimes pay disparities, and I think we're kind of moving away from that, but then also due to the varying pathways that we truly enjoy. And
Right.
again, that kind of lends diversity of our degree, right? We can do
Right.
multiple things. And
Exactly.
so again, I really appreciate you today really humanizing this side of our work, but then also giving us an insight, some insight into the work that you do daily for the community and in the city of Los Angeles. Just anyone have any final questions before we wrap up here? Thoughts, questions?
I just wanted to say
When
thank
looking for
you.
certain positions or roles.
Oh,
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
no, I just wanted to say a quick thank you. It was definitely really, really enlightening to hear a different perspective. And I feel like it's helped me answer a lot of questions that I've had just about like the different levels of policy and like ways to act in different situations.
Thanks, Kaylin. And I'm telling you, I mean, I just scratched the surface. There is so much that you can do out there. And I just hope that take some steps to check it out. I think it is Akia. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but you put in the chat, what are the key titles or words you should use when you're searching for employment? I don't do that. I don't suggest my students do that because the titles are so varied. What you need to understand, there are a lot of social workers out there that will help you do that, and maybe you could talk to Dr. Kim and some of your professors about this. The skills that we have, especially even in our internship, they're transferable to a number of different settings. All you have to do is identify what those skills are, and then when you look at a job description, even though they're asking for a degree in something else, you could just say, "Hey, I have a social work degree, but guess what? I can do these things because I've done it in my internship or in my work." Right? So all the skills that you have coming out of this MSW program are applicable to any job that you find out there. You just can't lead with saying I have an MSW because most people don't understand what an MSW does. They're going to think, oh, you're applying for the wrong position. You're supposed to be applying for a clinical position, right? But they don't know that we do government policy, organizational kind of stuff, or that you have the skills to do that and to get in. So, my most important piece of advice would be, and I mentioned this earlier, um, get out and meet the kind of people that are doing the kind of work that you want to do, because those are the people that will give you the insight as to how to find those jobs, right? So you see someone, go to a website or an agency. Oh, I like what they're doing, but they don't hire social workers. Look up somebody on there, you know, and say, hey, reach out to somebody or make a phone call and say, hey, I'm getting my MSW and I have the skills that um, would go really great with your agency and what you're doing, and I have an interest in this area, and I'd love to learn more about what you do and maybe how I could gain some experience or employment in this particular area. You know, being a student and someone who's freshly graduated, people love that, right? Because people love to be able to help you as you get going in your career. It doesn't matter if they're social workers or not. People out there are always welcoming, 99.9%. So just don't be afraid to go out there and put yourself out there and say, hey, I want to try to figure out what I'm going to do. Can you help me? And people are very happy to help you. I put my all my contact information in there in the chat for you. So you can email me if you have any questions. You can go onto my website. I always have exciting stuff, multiple things, like Dr. Kim said. I've got multiple things going on. So you can check out what's going on my website. You can follow me on LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn account, that is the way that professionals connect. So I would encourage you to get a LinkedIn, get a nice, headshot, professional photo, put yourself out there and start connecting with social workers. I've connected with hundreds of social workers on LinkedIn. It's amazing. Definitely should do it. I think we probably connected through LinkedIn, right, Dr. Kim?
That is exactly how we connected. Yes, LinkedIn.
Yeah, and
Yep.
then my Instagram as
Yeah,
well.
my
You can
students,
follow me.
the students that are in this course, they all have a LinkedIn. That was
Oh,
an
awesome.
assignment for this semester. So
Awesome.
I'm pretty sure you'll be getting some LinkedIn connections from
Great,
some of
great.
these students. Of course, Maddie, yes, she's always on it. But one of
Awesome.
the
So
things
yeah, make
that
sure make sure I can tell you're from Florida Gulf Coast University because
yes.
I try to follow social workers and social work students, but I'll follow you back. So
Yes, one of the things that I wanted to just touch base on is that every guest speaker always affirms something that I share with the class. And literally, before you came on today, we were talking about jobs and we were talking about how to locate roles. And I said exactly what you shared. Use the keywords of those transferable skills to locate the job. Do not use social
okay.
worker
Yeah.
in the job description
Love it.
or the search engine. Use the transferable skill that you have because that is going to populate and generate jobs that you may be interested in versus the title social worker because it's
Yeah,
limited, right?
right. Yeah,
However, we have a plethora of skills and tasks that we can do. And so use the keywords of the transferable skills that you want to use in the search engine when
right,
you are locating jobs. But then to your point, you can also connect with individuals directly in the field. And again, individuals are way open. They are really open with supporting. Again, that is how Dr. Manalo,
Manalo, Manalo.
Manalo, I'm sorry,
It's all
and I
right.
connected. We connected on LinkedIn. And so, yes, individuals are very excited to help. And so you just have to put yourself out there and you can't be scared to do it because it is a welcoming space. And
Yeah,
so, yes, I appreciate you so much. If no one has any other questions, we are done for the day. And I will make sure that this recording gets out to everyone.